Hello my little learners, you can call me Lovegood, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Here are just a few things before we get started. Today, I'm presenting you with the first chapter of Vertigo, titled The Prologue, at the bottom, by cursedbythenarrative. On AO3. Thank you so much, cursedbythenarrative, for letting me podfic this if you ever somehow find this. I apologise if my voice acting is bad. I'm trying to improve as much as I can. A quick note from me before we start. The author has kindly provided content warning chapters at the start of each chapter, so I will be reading those out per chapter. I think I got the main ones though, and they are in the description. But I will be reading the author's ones out as provided. But anyways, thank you for tuning in to listen to me, but that's enough of my rambles and jambles, and let's get right into the fic. This is the summary. What, I know you or something? Chuuya asked. Briefly, a look rushed over Dazai Osamu's face, an emotion so quick Chuuya couldn't put a name to it. Then, his face mellowed out into a smile that had Chuuya itching for a fight. That screamed, I think I'm the smartest person in the room, with just enough smugness and condescension to really rile him up. No, Dazai said, and looked weirdly vulnerable, like he was admitting some big secret. No, you don't. Or, the fight against the DOA ends badly for everyone involved. Now, the only person capable of ending everything before it even happens would rather be dead and buried alongside his friends than deal with time travel of all things. Worse, when whatever adverse reaction no longer human had to the book has burned Dazai off of the timeline as a whole. Let's get right into the fic. For the first time in his life, Dazai Osamu could feel the effects of corruption. Usually, at the very most, he had felt the wind caused by Chuuya's sheer power tussle his hair a bit. Usually, no longer human, wrapped around his body and let him hide from gravity like a shield. Usually, Dazai swaggered up from somewhere behind Chuuya, undisturbed by the mad giggle on Chuuya's lips and, depending on how close the two of them were to cutting it, the blood dribbling out of them, and gently closed his hand around a wrist or shoulder, or once his cheek, and nullified. Now, no longer human, flickered like a dying flame with every step Dazai took. It was a series of unlikely, horrible, no-good-at-all events that had landed them in this mess. For once in his life, though, Dazai was not at fault, or maybe he was, what with accidentally not killing Dostoevsky and all, and he'd also not been the mastermind behind the use of corruption. His cane caught on a rock, and Dazai almost fell. Dr. Yoshino had warned him. If you do this, she had said quickly, quiet and somber, someone like her, it had seriously unnerved him. I can't promise I'll get to you in time. Their temporary little emergency base, about 2.5 miles away from Chuuya, and the wake of destruction laying in his wake, had been nearly empty then. The atmosphere tense. This is it. Their shitty little walls had seemed to say. This is the end. What she was really saying, of course, was that even without the effects of corruption on his overworked ability and his barely holding it together body, his chance of survival was slim. Even if he had managed to nullify corruption, which seemed less and less likely considering he could feel the gravitational push and pull of Chuuya's ability, there was no way of knowing if Yoshino would be able to reach him to heal any of his injuries. Just as there was no way of knowing if she'd get the timing right, should she make it to him. Dazai appreciated the sentiment all the same. He'd survived against all odds, had gotten this far. Surely Oda would be proud to see what he'd done with his worthless little life. Surely now he'd be able to respite. I made a promise, he had answered instead, because he had, mostly to himself, mostly in secret, but a promise all the same. Nakahara Chuuya would die, yes, but he'd die human and hopefully of old age with some dumb dog at his feet, not ever because of corruption. Besides, what choice did he have? You might not like to hear this, Rampo had piped up from somewhere behind Yoshino. He'd been all but dragged into one of their makeshift cots, and was now hidden behind a thick privacy curtain. But, if you left it alone, this particular problem would solve itself. He is already breaking down. Perhaps Rampo was right. Perhaps the most logical thing to do was do nothing at all. To preserve what little fighting power the ADA had left, and leave Chuuya to do what had always been his fate. For now, Chuuya's rampage had been focused on the outskirts of Yokohama, mainly abandoned factory buildings and, ironically enough, the illegal dumping site where Dazai had spent most of his adolescence. Perhaps the right thing to do was to keep playing and figure out where Dostoevsky had hidden himself in the book. If Dazai were to look at the situation the way he would have at 15, when his life was nothing but a giant game of chess, perhaps he'd see that, in the grand scheme of things, Nakahara Chuuya wasn't valuable enough to die while trying to save him. Unfortunately, Dazai wasn't 15 anymore, hadn't been for quite some time now, and this had never been up for debate in the first place. "I promised," he had repeated instead. Then, with the familiar light-hearted tone he now had trouble slipping into, he had added, "With how I am now, I won't be that much help anyways." "We need you," Roundbird said from behind the curtain. Dazai could feel his eyes on him still, could feel the way Yosna had tried to keep it together. Even now he was stumbling into his death, 2 years at the ADA. Half dead or not. Dazai had smiled, genuinely and warm at the way he learned to do with the ADA, and that had been that. He could see Chuuya now. Corruption had done its worst. Chuuya had never quite gotten this bad before. Dazai had always been good at cancelling corruption before Chuuya got even close to dying. Now, blood and grime stuck to his face and hands, and the marks, looked like they were bleeding too, angry and red and burned into his skin. Dazai was sure they'd scar. The maniacal laughter Dazai had grown to associate with corruption had long since died down and been replaced with an earth-shattering howl that seemed to resonate deep in Dazai's bones. Chuuya seemed downright feral. This was Aharabaki. This was calamity, and not the man Dazai knew like the back of his hand. "Maybe I'm too late," he thought helplessly. "Maybe there is no coming back from this." Still, and despite knowing just how bad the situation had gotten, Dazai couldn't help admiring the sheer level of power needed to, so thoroughly, level the area. He was standing just a couple of steps away from his old shipping container now, and watched, fascinated, as one of Chuuya's attacks crushed the old metal, though it was nothing more than a cheap tin can. In a way, this felt divine. Never before had he so clearly understood that, at its core, Aharabaki, and now perhaps by extension Chuuya, was a god first and foremost. His next steps had no longer human sizzle out. Chuuya's head snapped to him, eyes painfully empty, unresponsive, and for a second, Dazai thought he could see something like recognition in his face. Then the second was over, and Dazai was pulled up away, high into the air, only for no longer human to flicker back to life and make him fall, no, plummet, to the ground. He did not have time to react to falling, had no time to realize how fast the ground was approaching. Thankfully, he could not feel his bones break under their own weight as his body reached terminal velocity. Perhaps the pain was too much for his already overwhelmed brain to register, or maybe his mind had started to break down the second Chuuya had shot him in the shoulder back in Mersalute. All in all, dying felt quite peaceful. Then, somewhere in the back of his head, he heard a wailing. Only, the wailing didn't stay in his head, and instead seemed to come at him from every angle. Until, finally, Chuuya crouched over him, still feral, still bleeding, still visibly exhausted beyond repair, but Chuuya all the same, with his face still burrowed in the dust, half blind with blissfully unhurting broken arms. Dazai flailed upwards until he thought he made contact with Chuuya's skin. Then, in a blinding flash of blue, everything went dark. Alright, my little learners, that is the end of Chapter 1, the prologue. This is a very interesting fic, and I loved it the first time I read it, so I'm very excited to be able to podfic this, so I'm so thankful for the author to let me. I have never done Bungo Stray Dogs voices before, and though I've watched the show and reactions to the show, the voices are definitely not as good because I've heard less Bungo Stray Dogs podfics than I have MHA because there are just less Bungo creators as there are MHA. So sadly the voices are not great. I think with time and with the more reading I do of this fic, they will get better. But for now, they aren't great and I can tell. But I tried reviewing the voices again and again, but it just would not stick, and I'm sorry for that. So, my little learners, this is a little reminder you might have something you need to check. I hope you all have a fantastic time wherever and whenever you may be. Day, night, dust, dawn, low tide, high tide, whatever it is for you. You can call me Lovegood, and that was the first chapter of Vertigo, titled Chapter 1, Prologue at the bottom, by cursedbythenarrative on AO3. Again, link to this fic will be in the pinned comment by me on this video, and tags are in the description as well as warnings. Bye, yellow learners!